Welcome back to the Chasing Happiness podcast, an honest podcast about finding happiness, what it really means, and the process of getting there. My name is Crystal, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with a friend of mine, Ashley. In a second, I'm going to get you to introduce yourself, but I do want to let everyone know who is listening to this podcast. Ashley and I have known each other for a while because we went to undergrad studies together, and Ashley is doing some amazing things as a single mom during COVID, rolling out a business, getting things settled. So we're going to talk about all the fun stuff. But Ashley, for people who don't have the pleasure of knowing you the way that I know you, do you want to introduce yourself and let people know what it is that you do?
Absolutely. I'm so excited to be here. So my name is Ashley Lemothe. I am a solo mama of two tiny humans. I am an Indigenous mompreneur, self-proclaimed, and the founder of two businesses, Creative Quay and Creative Resonation. So Creative Quay is a business I started in 2017 after a year of grieving the loss of my kid's dad. I decided I wanted to do things my own way. So I founded Creative Quay with the help of some amazing supports in my community. And that has grown into this whole entity of creativity coaching, courses, workshops, and basically helping women find their creative spirit and strengthen their relationship with creativity. And more recently, June 21st, website live drop. I'm terrified, but my second business is Creative Resonation, where I take my traditional Anishinaabe teachings and translate them into products. So things like keychains, tumblers, coffee cups, you name it, I'm creating it with resin and vinyl.
I am so excited for that. I cannot wait. And this podcast will probably go up after it. So it will be live by the time people hear this. So do you want to let people know how they can find it on the web or how they can follow you on social media to go and check it all out?
Absolutely. So both businesses have their own social channels. So you can find Creative Quay, which is all about creativity and the power of positivity at Creative Quay. And the website is creativequay.ca. And Creative Resonation goes live website through Shopify. Amazing. Big shout out to Shopify. They are like the bomb diggity when it comes to e-commerce. Awesome. So user-friendly. But that will be Creative Resonation, and Resonation is RESINATION.com. And same thing, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, you name it, you can find me.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. And I will post in the show notes for this episode links to all of Ashley's stuff so that you can find it easily if you're listening and want to check it all out. So Ashley, let's talk because during the last year and a half of COVID, you've decided to start a second business as a single solopreneur mom. What on earth drove you to do that?
So a lot of it, like you mentioned, we met through undergrad, and after school, I went into a job full time. It was a great position. I thought it was a great position. I thought it was what I wanted to do. I met my partner when I was in this job, and we just started building this life together. And then he passed away very suddenly in 2015 when I was 5.5 months pregnant with my second. And my oldest had just turned 2. So I was thrown into like this tailspin of grief, loss, solo parenting, you name it. It was a gong show, to say the very least. So I spent that year trying to figure out how I was going to A, support my kids, and B, support myself and make myself happy, because I wasn't. I realized in hindsight, after some serious grief work and counseling and all of the mental health supports, that I hadn't been happy for a while. So after a year, I picked up all my pieces and I moved me and my kids back to my hometown of Peterborough. And scariest decision I ever made, because I gave up my townhouse. I gave up everything, left that life, and started from scratch in Peterborough. I remember We didn't even have a place to live. So we were couch surfing for the first month because it literally was like, I need to get out of this city of St. Catherine and I need to go home and start again.
Sure.
So that's what I did. And I remember sitting on the floor of the bedroom we were staying in with family. My 2 kids were sleeping and I just started crying because I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I had this job for so long. It was cushy. It was, all of the things, but it was also toxic.
Right.
So there was a lot of lateral violence and just a whole bunch of things that had come through while I was grieving. So I was like, I don't want that. I don't want to do that again.
Right.
So I walked into OW. Scariest decision I ever made was going to Ontario Works and basically just saying, I need help. I don't know what I'm doing. I've never done this before. Like my life plan did not include being a widow and a solo mom. Like that was not part of the plan. But, I had amazing workers, thankfully, who believed in me and said, okay, like, start with this. We're going to put you on assistance. And I felt like a failure. Like, I can't even support my kids.
Right.
But that's what those services are for, is for people who are like, I don't know what to do next. Right. So I was able to do that. I was able to meet with an amazing employment counselor who looked at my resume and was like, have you ever thought about starting a business? And I looked at her and said, are you crazy? I have 2 kids. Like, what? And she's like, well, with your education, your passion, she's like, have you ever thought about it? We have a self-employment program. And I took the application and I said, let me think about it. I went home and I was like, man, starting a business, doing things my own way, creating and doing what I love and what I'm passionate about. And then that turned into me starting to dream way bigger than I ever thought possible. So, fast forward to today and I'm got a second business going because why not? And that's literally my catchphrase for everything is why not? Why not try it? Why not, see what happens? And that's where creative resonation is. I've always loved creating and being creative. So this is where this comes in, is like, I'm very passionate about my teachings, about being in Anishinaabe Quay, about, sharing that knowledge. And in recent times in the last little bit, all of the horrors and atrocities coming out about what happened at the residential school system and all of the grief and mourning that Indigenous communities all over Turtle Island are feeling. I wanted to also showcase that we are beautiful, we are proud, and we have Indigenous ways of knowing that is just so amazing and positive and beautiful that I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to start a business where, people can purchase and learn our teachings and really focus on the beauty, because we're not all trauma. And that was one of the biggest things for me as I was going through my own mourning, because I'm a 3rd generation residential school survivor. So my great grandma went to residential school. My grandma went to day school, and both, had traumas associated with that. So trauma bloodline, that's our family. So I wanted to showcase the beauty, because we're more than our trauma. And that goes for everyone, not just, what's going on right now, but just in general. We can't let our trauma overtake us. We can choose every day, and it's a hard choice every day to choose whether you're going to let your trauma run you or if you're going to work with it.
And that's such a huge thing for people. And I think you've brought up a couple of things that I want to touch on, because the fact that collectively, I think people in this country especially are finally starting to recognize the trauma of what has happened to First Nations across this country, not just, in history 100 years ago, but as recently as our lifetime, right? I think people are unsure of how they can take a step forward, how they can not necessarily help heal, but learn and create something better so that things never happen again. So I love that part of what you're doing is helping spread teachings, helping people to find a place where they can learn a little bit more, where they can feel safe to inquire a little bit more about the culture, about the lessons, about the beauty of what has been lost. Because so much of that language, so much of those teachings may have been lost over the last few hundred years. And such a small percentage of First Nations people have tried really hard to hold on to what they can because of that. And I think if we can, as a society, create a space where we can help that be learned by more than just a specific tiny part of the community that's trying to hold on to it, for the world to learn the beauty of being connected to the earth and why that matters, and being connected to, certain dances and other things. I know you and I talked back in undergrad a lot about different aspects of the culture because we were lucky enough to be at a school that actually had something that said to people like, hey, we have a strong community here. We need to support them. Here's, a center for them where you can come and learn, where you can inquire, where you can get involved. And so it definitely gave me the sense in undergrad that I had permission to ask about it, that I had the right to learn if I chose to more about those things, which is ultimately where I started to learn about residential schools, because it's not something we were taught, right? Just as well as I do, that was never something we were taught. And I think we need to talk about it, as uncomfortable as it is, as hard as it is. It is something that if we don't talk about it, if we're not willing to face it head on and say, you know what, mistakes were made. This never should have happened. It did happen. A price needs to be paid for that, because we are, as a society, collectively responsible for that. We may not live in the same world today that we did 30 years ago, but we are still responsible for the society today. And even if we don't want to acknowledge that, our parents, our grandparents were a part of making those decisions, it doesn't change the fact that it happened. We are where we are now today, and we need to step up and say it did happen in our society. We apologize. We're sorry. It never should have happened. How can we make sure collectively, with all of the voices, that it never happens again? So I think that's really important. And I appreciate you touching on that. For anyone who does, because you are from that community, for anyone who does want to inquire more, learn more, what is your suggestion to them to start to do that? Aside from obviously Google and, a public library, what is your best suggestion for people to get educated?
Really look at, and this is the beauty of modern technology, is there are some amazing Indigenous content creators on social media. So primarily Instagram and TikTok, in all honesty, and they're open to sharing. One of the biggest things when the 215 beautiful souls who were finally found and discovered in Kamloops, when that first came out, I had so many messages from non-Indigenous being like, what can I do? What can I do? The number one thing is pay attention to the Indigenous people community that you know and the people that you know. Because as those things started coming out, we're also in a state of mourning. So, it's not easy for us to just be like, oh, here's, everything you can go learn about this.
Right.
Like, we're in a state of mourning. So being respectful and being mindful of, there are some Indigenous folks that don't want to share and don't want to talk about it.
Sure.
And then there are others who are, advocating and taking a stand and making, amazing content about where you can go. The few that are right now doing such amazing advocacy work, go follow them right now. Sister Sage, Lynn Marie, she's based out of BC. She is an amazing advocate for Indigenous issues. The Raven Institute is another one doing amazing things. There are Sacred Matriarch Collective, Creative, Sacred Matriarch creative, is doing amazing things as well and advocating. Like, give them a follow, go check them out. They're posting all the time. And even just looking up on Facebook, there are so many resources that are being shared. It just, type in Indigenous resources or Indigenous allyship. And there are, a lot of really amazing content from Indigenous folks of here's what you can do to be an ally. Sometimes it's not, just going straight to an Indigenous person and be like, what can I do to help? What can I do? Like, I don't know what to do. Sometimes it's as simple as acknowledging what's going on in the world around you and in the country that so many people are like, Canada's the greatest country. From a state of privilege, absolutely. But recognizing, acknowledging, and getting uncomfortable with the truth.
Right.
And with the realistic happenings of what's going on. Because so many people are like, oh, well, residential school was so long ago. The last one closed in 1996. Right. And a lot of the trauma has been transferred over into the child welfare system. And I'm not going to go into too much detail about that because there are some amazing content and advocates that are talking about that, but it's just something to know that it hasn't stopped. It's not a past horror, past trauma. It is current continued assault on Indigenous people. And it's happening as recent as today. Every day there is something. So, but we are not all trauma. And sometimes it's really difficult. You're going to have Indigenous folks who are going through multiple levels of grief and triggering. And, one day, even for myself, one day I'm all about the positivity and being like, yeah, like showcase the beauty of our culture, of us. Like, there are people who went to residential school or who hid in basements and floorboards and in the woods to keep our teachings, to keep our culture. We need to honor them as well as the ones who never made it home. We also need to honor the ones who survived those schools and who are still speaking the language, sharing our teachings, have that wisdom and those Indigenous ways of knowing. And it's our responsibility to carry those on. And that's, for myself, that's where I see it for today. Tomorrow, I could be a puddle on the floor crying over the thousands of kids who never made it home. The next day, it's every day is something new and something different. But for today, it's like we need to carry that on and honor those who survived the system and honor those who, the parents who hid their kids from the Indian agents, who, made sure that those teachings weren't lost, and the ones who went to these schools and still practiced underground. For so long, it was illegal to speak our language, to share our teachings, to do anything that was deemed Indigenous. So now we need to be responsible to those who carried those, who went through the abuse and trauma to keep our teachings.
Right.
And that's really where I'm at for today.
Well, and I love that you bring up that, this is where I am today because it could change tomorrow. And I think that's part of the human experience, right? We all have days. I met a wonderful soul on Clubhouse. People who listen to this podcast will be sick of me mentioning Clubhouse, but you and I were just talking about Clubhouse a moment ago. So I met a beautiful soul on Clubhouse who taught me a saying that I have sort of carried with me. And it's, we have good days and we have less than ideal days. Nobody has an actual bad day. We just have less than ideal days. And I think what you're saying is so true because you have days where you're pumped up and you're excited and you're creating things like these businesses where you can share as much as you want, but you're also human. So there's going to be days when you don't feel like getting out of bed in the morning. There's going to be days when you want to eat macaroni and cheese and binge Netflix, right? Like, that's just part of the human experience, right? And so I love that you mentioned that. And I wanted to touch on the fact that you talked about going to OW and asking for help, because I think this is a sticking point for us as humans. And so many of us are just afraid to ask for help because we do feel like failures in life if we haven't achieved certain things by, the regular milestone or whatever it happens to be. And I think it took a lot of courage for you to stand up and say, I need help with this. I need to get back on track, because you, of course, never expected to be a single mom with one kid and a second on the way and be totally alone in the journey, right? Like nobody plans that in life. So how on earth can we expect that you would have known how to handle it? So the fact that you were willing to say, you know what, I need help. I need someone to hold my hand through this journey and figure out what my next step is. I think that's huge. And I think everyone listening to this can take something from that, because it doesn't make you less. It doesn't make you a failure. It is the first step at creating the life that you want, the thing that is going to bring you the joy and change things. And it's not an overnight process, as you talked about. It takes time, and it takes learning and growth, and sometimes resources from other places. But those things do exist if you can have somebody point you in the right direction. And that's so vitally important for us.
Absolutely. And I mean, it only takes one person believing in you. Like, I will never forget that employment counselor who just flat out asked me, because it sparked that question of, could I start a business? And then it snowballed into this whole thing. Like, now Creative Quay in my mind, when I first started Creative Quay, I'll never forget going to get my business license and paying, the $60 for
right.
5 years of, okay, Creative Quay, what is this going to be? And I tried so many things in the first year. I failed so many times, had canceled workshops, but it was all about, trying and seeing what fit, seeing what didn't, and knowing that places like Ontario Works had my back, of like, I feel safe enough to try these things.
Right.
Because there's such a stigma attached with going to that agency and going to social services and needing help. There's a stigma, especially, and I say this from just me, especially as an Indigenous woman. I was petrified that walking into Ontario Works was going to get CAS called on me, because they're going to think I can't provide for my kids,
right.
And that is literally one of the top things that Indigenous parents face. There is always that underlying fear of, someone going to call CAS on me because I'm in business and because we do things differently. And, there's all this stigma and mindset and, like, again, trauma response, right? Of just everything. So, but that one person that believed in me and was like, you can do this. And then the program was 60 weeks. I had one of the most amazing mentors who literally encouraged me to try new things, and was just met with her every month. It was part of, the program. And she just, well, have you thought about this? Well, what about this? And just being able to bounce ideas. And I think that's where I really started pursuing the coaching aspect of it, because I'm a creative at heart. Like, creativity saved me so many times in so many situations where I could just express myself without expectation. And that's what creative and a creative practice should do. It shouldn't be, yes, people can monetize their creativity. I mean, I'm doing it right now with creative recreation, so I fully get that. But an actual creative practice should be something that is your own expression in your own terms. And so many people get caught up in the monetization of it. Or, if I start something, a creative project, or if I start, taking care of myself and doing self-care, that's going to lead, that's going to place all these expectations. No, creative practice shouldn't do that. Releasing the expectations, getting rid of the damn box that we as a society seem to be so compelled to try and fit in, and just doing stuff our own way. And, being ourselves, being our weird, odd, unique. I mean, I spent my first bit of okay, what's a businesswoman supposed to look like? What am I supposed to, that, stigma of okay, so I can't have my kids in Zoom calls. It needs to be super quiet. I need to have a white space background, look professional. And now I'm My kids may or may not come back in. There's some, behind me, there's all kinds of chaos. And in front of me, there's all kinds of chaos. Shoot, that's the way I work. That's how I am. I'm neurodivergent. So things that make sense to other people don't make sense to me. So I'm making my life work for me instead of the other way around.
I love that. And that's such a good thing for people because that's how it should be, right? Your life should be working for you, not against you.
Yes. But again, it's societal expectations, stigma attached. It takes some days, it's still like really hard for me to be myself and be authentic because I get backlash. Right. But you just carry on. You figure out I have an amazing support system. I have some awesome business women who are rock stars and badasses that really help uplift me when I'm feeling those low moments. And I do the same for them. So it's creating your circle of people who are like you. And there are people out there that are just as weird and odd as you. They're going to love your weirdness.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much. I do want to be respectful of your time, and I can hear the dog crying in the background. So clearly he wants to go outside. So I typically end the podcast with 4 questions for people. Are you game to answer?
Sure.
Wonderful. Okay. So the first question is, if you could go back in time and give yourself any piece of advice, what would it be?
Can I swear?
Sure.
Back in time, fuck the patriarchy. Do shit your own way. Let go of what society thinks you should be.
I love that. I love that. Oh, I love you. And that is so the exact answer I would expect from you. And I absolutely love it. Okay. What's one thing about yourself that you want to work on?
My biggest right now is working on playing with my kids more. I've been so caught up in business and trying to create a sustainable life for us and through COVID, it's just been a whole bunch. So I'm really making a focus this summer to just play.
I love that. Oh, I so love that. And I definitely want to have you back on the podcast in a month or so that we can check in and see how the new launch has gone. You're launching during COVID, how all of that is going, right? So if you're game for that, I am game for that as well.
Absolutely.
Woohoo. Okay. Next question. What is the best or worst piece of advice you've ever been given?
Ooh. So in all honesty, as much as I love post-secondary, the worst piece of advice I was ever given is that I needed to go to post-secondary to be successful.
I actually love that you said that because so many of us are told we need the education. And you and I were just talking actually before we started recording about the fact that I've decided to go back to school, and it is something I debated. So you and I went to post-secondary together. Getting a higher level of education and going after my master's was like, the world tells me I need to do it, but do I really? And I ultimately came to the decision for myself that I want it for me, not for anything else, but just for me. And I think that's so important because especially for undergrad, right? We're told go to high school, get an undergrad degree, go to college, go to trade school, something. But so many people can make a successful life without that debt, without that 4 years, without whatever is involved. I love that.
Yeah. And so many people who don't want to go to school but feel like they need to end up just as lost, but with more debt.
Right.
So there needs to be more focus on, again, which is all about what you do, finding what makes you happy. If going to school doesn't make you happy, don't go.
Right.
I mean, go get your, at least your high school. That is always important. And I'm always, a big fan of staying in school. But if post-secondary is not where you want to be, don't let anyone else, including guidance counselors or other professionals, tell you that you need to. You don't. Right. What you need to do is find out where your passions are and use those.
Oh, I love that. That's such a great piece of advice. And I kind of want to end it there, but there is one more question. And I think it's the most important question that I ask people. So the question is, what does happiness mean to you?
Happiness to me is freedom, respect, and daily laughter.
Oh, I love that. Daily laughter. I love that. I've never actually thought about laughter as happiness. Oh my God, that's kind of beautiful.
The simple joys of laughing, and especially being I'm a mom, 100% mom first. Being able to engage with my kids and have fun with them and hearing them laugh and just having a good belly laugh with them. It could be the most ridiculous thing, like a funny voice or, a 30-second dance party where we're dancing ridiculously and just having simple, innocent joy. And to me, that is, if we can do that every day, even if we're not feeling the greatest, we're ending on a good note.
I so love that. And I love you, Ashley, for coming on today. And I am so grateful that you agreed to this. And I am so, so overjoyed that I got to see your beautiful face because it feels like it has been forever since we've actually been able to chat.
No kidding. Anytime. I love it. And I love all the amazing things you're doing. Honestly, Crystal, anytime. Anything I can do to support you, I'm all over it.
Oh, you are such a magical person. Thank you so much for being here. And for everyone listening to this podcast, as I said, I will put in the show notes all of the links to all of Ashley's wonderful adventures so that you can follow along as well. And I appreciate you all for listening and being a part of the conversation because it is so unbelievably important for us all to chat with each other. And Ashley, I 100% look forward to having this conversation on the podcast with you in a month or so that we can see how the new business is going. Lady who is now going to be running an empire.
Woohoo! Yes. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. 1,000 yeses.
Thank you so much for everybody listening. Have a great week. I will chat with you all soon. Bye for now.